Hello and welcome. I'm Tom Burges Watson. You are watching W News, broadcasting live from the Al Arabiya News headquarters. These are our top stories. Iran's foreign minister visits Saudi Arabia for talks over the situation in the region. At least 45 Palestinians have been killed, 130 others injured in Israeli attacks during the last 24 hours. This as heavy fighting leaves 400,000 people trapped in Gaza. President Biden cancels his trip to Germany as millions of people in Florida are advised to evacuate immediately. A severe weather system, Hurricane Milton, is on track to make landfall. Welcome. The Israeli army said today that operations are ongoing throughout Gaza. And there are reports of intense shelling in and around the north of the enclave, where the towns of Beit Lahia, Beit Hanun and Jabalia are being targeted. Well, yesterday, the IDF issued new evacuation orders, which analysts say suggest that Hamas is regrouping. Well, at least 45 people have died in strikes during the last 24 hours. 400,000 Palestinians are currently trapped in the north. Well, officials say the total number of people killed since Israel launched its war in Gaza has now passed 42,000. Well, for more, we can speak now to Adnan Abu Hasna, who is a spokesperson for the United Nations Palestinian Refugee Agency, UNRWA, who joins us now from Cairo. Thank you so much for taking the time to speak to us. UNRWA, we understand, has been forced to halt services in parts of northern Gaza. I'm just wondering what the latest is that you're hearing about the situation on the ground, specifically in and around the town of Jabalia.
It is horrific. Nearly 400,000, people are fleeing, the area, or still, in Jabalia camp and the Beit Lahia area, as they believe that there is no safe place at all. So they prefer to stay at their shelters, actually, especially in Jabalia camp. Many people are being killed in the last 24 hours, and hundreds have been injured. Also, shelters are being destroyed. Maybe this is the 10th time or 9 times, that Jabalia camp, people, they are fleeing, or they are being displaced, actually, many times. They don't know where to go. Now, and beside that, we at UNRWA, we closed, 7 shelters, 7 schools that, used to shelter tens of thousands of people. And we have the water wells, we have 8 water wells in Jabalia camp. 6 of them are shut down, now because of the fighting, because of the huge, shelling, actually, that it's not safe at all for UNRWA employees or for ordinary people who are trapped, actually, in that area.
Yeah, we understand that 3 hospitals in northern Gaza have been told to evacuate. And I just want to ask what the reason is for that, and where are the patients supposed to go?
There's no way, actually. Where to go, we don't understand. There's only 1 hospital still functioning in Gaza City. It's functioning about 20% of its capacity. They call it, its name is Al Ahli Hospital, actually, in the middle of Gaza City. But if you look at the health sector in general, in the northern part of Gaza City and in the southern part of Gaza City, the health sector is collapsing. So it's, horrific. We don't know what's going, it's crazy what's going on, now, where to evacuate them. 3 hospitals, most of them, they are actually, damaged. Its capacity at the low level, they don't function, as before. And you talk about 400,000 people. Now they have no hospitals, no healthy clinics, even, the only healthy clinics of UNRWA also shut down. So it's really, the health sector or the health circumstances are, deteriorating, and people are trapped. No services, no water, no health services, no sewage system, nothing at all there.
Yeah, and some of those hospitals, we understand, served an additional role, not just to treat the injured, but they were also being used as shelters by thousands of people, weren't they?
Yes, that's true, actually. And today also, they shelled one of the hospitals, according to the news coming out from Jabalia camp, and many had been killed, in the court of the Yemen, hospitals, and tens of people had been injured because people, they believe that hospitals, UN schools, UNRWA schools, safe, but actually are not safe. And many had been killed in our shelters or around the shelters or inside hospitals.
It's being said by some analysts and being implied by Israel as well that Hamas is appearing to regroup in some areas. So that means there's no end in sight to the violence, doesn't it?
Look, this is what the Israelis said, actually. But we are looking at the whole picture. We are talking about 400,000 people, The question, how many Hamas, are being there? The conclusion of all what's going on, that innocent people, civilians, they are paying a very heavy price. Most of the people that had been killed in the last 24 hours, they are, elderly people, they are, children and women. It's very simply, they are just people, they want to survive. They don't have, any idea about politics. They don't talk politics. They just people, they stay around there, destroy homes, hoping that there will be a ceasefire. But now they are displacing them, pushing them out of these, destroyed shelters to the nowhere, actually.
Indeed. So, I mean, basically, there is no end in sight, is there?
Yes. Actually, people, they are hopeless. They don't know where to go. The lack of services, lack of food, the hunger is deepening, reminding us of the early days when the north of Gaza Strip, we were suffering a lot, and everyone was screaming and crying for food, for help. But now, actually, what's going on, that the Israeli or the IDF, actually, they are evacuating the whole area, pushing 400,000 people out of that area. It is a catastrophe because no one will be able to service or to give, food and to provide health services or water or anything, any kind of services, actually. It is impossible now because the shelling is so heavy. And, people, talking to us I talked to some people there in the northern part of Gaza, and they told me that even at the beginning, of this war after October 7, it was not like that.
And just lastly, the winner of this year's Nobel Peace Prize will be announced tomorrow, we understand. UNRWA is tipped to be one of the hot favourites to be awarded for that Peace Prize. I just wonder what it would mean to you and your team were that to happen.
It means that the international community and the world and everyone is rewarding us for the great work, the humanitarian work, because we are a leading, element. We are a leading, power, so providing people with all kinds of services, psychological support, food, health, water, and everything. And nearly 230 of our colleagues had been killed. And this is the biggest number since the establishment of the UN in 1948. And despite all the difficulties and all the death and all the destructions, we continue to work because we believe in the UN values. We are mandated to do that despite all the evacuation orders, despite all the killing, the shelling, the destruction. We are there, continue to work because we believe in our mission. We believe in the UN values. We believe in the international law. We believe in Geneva Accord. So we are representing the good side of the story, the good side for those who believe in a humanitarian work.
All right. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to speak to us. Adnan Abu Hasna, spokesperson for UNRWA. Thank you very much indeed.
Thanks.
Meanwhile, 2 people were killed today in a rocket attack on the northern Israeli city of Kiryat Shmona, which is near the border with Lebanon. Well, this area of Israel has been the regular target of Hezbollah rocket fire. Well, Israel expanded its military operation into Lebanon in response to these kinds of cross-border attacks by Hezbollah. The Lebanese government, meanwhile, says that more than 1.2 million people have been displaced during these past 2 weeks as a result of Israeli airstrikes. Well, many people have spoken about the situation on the streets of Beirut as they seek refuge in public spaces.
Netanyahu's threat won't make us surrender, and he knows it. There's great steadfastness and the resistance. Hezbollah promised us victory, and we hope for victory. We will never give up.
You cannot say, get rid of Hezbollah. They're Lebanese. Did Hezbollah come from another planet? No. It is a part of the Lebanese social fabric. Hezbollah will recontact the government, and the decision shall be in the hands of the country's officials.
I tell Hezbollah, if you can no longer continue the battle in a proper way, announce your withdrawal and loss. It's not a shame to lose.
Okay, people speaking there on the streets of Beirut. Meanwhile, Iran's foreign minister traveled to Saudi Arabia today for talks regarding the situation in the region. Well, for more on all of this, we can speak now to Hanin Ghadar, who is a senior fellow at the Washington Institute for Near East Policy think tank and also an expert on Hezbollah. Thank you so much for joining us once again here on Al Arabiya News. Contrary to what we've heard and all the attacks that have been carried out to degrade Hezbollah, it seems that they're still highly operational, doesn't it?
They are operational, yes, not highly operational. Like they have issues with their military, especially the more advanced missiles, the precision-guided missiles, the long-range missiles. They have been hitting the same areas. They haven't really escalated in the way that we were expecting them to escalate in case of the killing of their Secretary General Hassan Nasrallah or that kind of bombing we're seeing in Lebanon. The response has always been promised to be much bigger than this. What they're doing now is using whatever missiles they still have, and those that they can access, because there are others that they cannot access. The advanced missiles are not easy to launch, so we don't see them using the precision-guided missiles, for example, because they need to be moved, put on trucks, calibrated, and it takes time for them to use this kind of advanced missiles, and Israel will bomb them before they launch them. So they are still capable because they still have some. The problem is that Israel is continuing with its military operations against the rest of their arsenal, and slowly but surely they will not have anything left except the very small weaponry like the guns and the small guns. Mm-hmm. The missiles, what Israel is doing is really destroying their arsenal, mainly all the missiles that could threaten Israel, and it's not going to stop before it finishes its mission and clears, of course, additionally clears the south of Litani. So they still have some because Israel is not done.
Indeed, and as well as targeting their military hardware, the Israeli army has been targeting their chain of command, their leaders. And we heard the Israeli Defense Minister Yoav Gallant saying that the man who was supposed to replace or succeed Hassan Nasrallah, and I'm talking here about Hashem Safieddine, has probably been, quote, eliminated. What are your thoughts? Do you think he's still alive?
No, probably not. If he's still alive, we would have heard. If he's still alive and they have a proof of him being alive, they would have confirmed it. They'd rather confirm it than hide it because it's humiliating that he actually was killed. And the fact that they couldn't reach his body, they couldn't get his body because of the magnitude of the strike and the fact that they can't actually reach the site to dig up his body due to the continuous Israeli bombings and threats means that the only reason why we didn't have a confirmation of his death, which is something that Hezbollah usually does for these people, is the fact that they haven't reached his body yet. And I think this is the main issue, like they can't say he's for sure that he's dead, and they can announce his death and hold a funeral until they reach his body. But most probably, yeah, he's gone.
So where does all of this leave Hezbollah's succession planning? If every time they announce someone new to replace Hassan Nasrallah, that person is promptly targeted and killed?
Yeah. I think it's not. They're not going to do that. We heard statements about their, shared decision-making process, which is ridiculous because they need a proper communication system to have a shared decision. They need the proper meeting spaces to have a shared decision. It's not happening. They don't make any decisions today. In the middle of this war, until this war is over, when they can actually start counting their losses and thinking of the future, they are incapable of making these kind of decisions. And I don't think they're capable of making that kind of decision of succession because the next successor is going to be killed. The problem is that Israel is not waiting for that. They're continuing to kill any potential successor. And I think at one point there will be no one left. And anyone who's left is not going to be qualified to be a leader or even a senior commander. They need time to train and appoint a new class of senior commandants and leaders. And there's no one to do that. So I think what's going to happen if there's a will by the Iranians to rebuild Hezbollah is that the Iranians, the IRGC themselves, will be on the ground with a hands-on approach on training and reorganizing Hezbollah. They will have to be, it will be like more of a Syria scenario where the IRGC will be back in Lebanon on the ground, like the beginning of Hezbollah, but more of a Syria scenario where they have to train themselves and rebuild whatever is left of Hezbollah if they can. Because I'm not sure they can. They would want to, but I'm not sure they can because Israel might actually target them as well. So they're waiting until Israel is done with what they would have to do. They're waiting for the next response, the Israeli response on Iran, to see what that means for them. They're waiting for some kind of diplomatic solution to this war to see if there's anything left of Hezbollah. There are a lot of factors that are going to influence this decision on when and how the IRGC would come to Lebanon to rebuild Hezbollah.
Okay, well, thank you very much indeed. We're out of time. Hanin Ghadar, Senior Fellow at the Washington Institute for Near East Policy. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you very much. Bye.
Let's get a brief check of some other stories we're following for you now. The Kremlin denies claims that the former US President Donald Trump has spoken with President Vladimir Putin 7 times since leaving office. Well, those claims were made in a book by the journalist Bob Woodward, which is set to be published later on this month. Well, the book also alleges that Trump secretly sent COVID-19 tests to Putin during the height of the pandemic. Well, the Trump campaign team has described these claims as, quote, the inventions of a madman. Germany's defense ministry is increasing support for Ukraine, with the Bundestag approving an additional 400 million euros in military aid for 2024. Well, the ministry says this funding will allow for 50 projects worth a total of 1.4 billion euros this year. Well, the US has also pledged an extra 8 billion euros in aid for Ukraine. Several US states have sued TikTok, claiming that the app is addictive for children and harms their mental health. Over a dozen states, including New York and California, have filed lawsuits related to the app's impact on teens and young users. Well, in all, 13 states allege that TikTok is designed to encourage compulsive and excessive use, negatively affecting children's mental well-being. We're going to take you to the United States now, where President Joe Biden has been forced to withdraw from what would have been the highest level meeting of Ukrainian donors in Germany. Well, the White House says that the president will have to stay in the US to monitor Hurricane Milton, which is expected to make landfall in Tampa, Florida, later on today. Well, for more, we can speak to our correspondent, Kate Fisher, who joins us now from Washington. Kate, great to have you with us. The US President Joe Biden pulling out of that Ramstein Group conference. It's now been postponed, and I'm assuming that's quite a setback for Ukraine and also for the German hosts.
It really is huge for both of them, particularly, of course, Volodymyr Zelensky, the Ukrainian leader, who is hoping to gather all these world leaders around to detail his so-called victory plan, which is a strategy aimed at getting Russia to the negotiating table. He was hoping at this meeting to get the US to agree for Ukraine to use long-range weapons, US weapons that could fire more deeply into Russia. And of course, it would have been symbolic to have gathered all these heads of state and for US President Joe Biden to really demonstrate the American support for Ukraine, as we are just a few weeks away from the US election, presidential election, and we don't know who will be in charge next year of the purse strings from the United States. And as for Germany itself as well, a big miss, because a sitting US president has not visited the country since 1985, which was Ronald Reagan who visited Bonn, and this was going to be a big deal. President Biden was going to be given the highest civilian honor in Germany. He would also have met with the French leader Macron and Keir Starmer, the leader of the United Kingdom. So it's a big miss for geopolitically and for kind of US influence on the world stage.
And what would a second Trump administration mean for Ukraine and the funding of its ongoing war with Russia?
Well, I think this is one of the reasons that Volodymyr Zelensky will be so concerned that this meeting has been postponed, because the worry is if Donald Trump becomes the US president, that the money may dry up somewhat. He has made it clear in his campaign rallies that he doesn't believe that the US should be supporting Ukraine with this much military aid. He called Volodymyr Zelensky the greatest salesman of all time, saying that he comes over here and gets $60 billion worth of aid without doing anything. He's also said that if he becomes president, he will solve the war between Ukraine and Russia even before he takes office, while he's still president-elect before the inauguration, and claims that if he had been president when war broke out, it would never have happened in the first place if he'd been in the White House. So it certainly isn't, it certainly would seem that if there is a Trump presidency, that Ukraine will get a lot less support from the United States. And of course, Donald Trump has made no bones about the fact that he doesn't agree with US being such a big part of NATO, which again will affect the defense of Ukraine.
Okay, well, thank you very much indeed for that update from Washington. Kate Fisher, thank you. Well, staying in the United States, Hurricane Milton is expected to make landfall on Florida's Gulf Coast during the coming hours. The storm has now been downgraded slightly to Category 4, which is still the second highest level. Well, millions of people have been given evacuation orders, and the authorities have issued dire warnings for those who choose to ignore the order. Well, Tampa Bay, which is home to more than 3 million people, could very well be in the eye of that storm when it comes ashore. Well, let's get the latest on this now with Weather Network presenter and storm hunter Mark Robinbson. Mark, thank you very much indeed for joining us. Looks pretty windy where you are. We understand that weather system has been downgraded slightly, but still a very severe weather system, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, as a meteorologist, it's fascinating to watch storms of this magnitude. But this is a highly populated area of Florida. You're talking about the Tampa region, Sarasota, all the way down to Punta Gorda, all of that big urban area. The winds themselves are starting to pick up. I'm going to step out just a little bit. You might not be able to hear me. I'm going to show you just a little bit of these absolutely deserted streets in the Tampa region. Step back in. There's a good gust right there. But this is just the outer bands. This is not the main part of the storm. When you get to those inner bands, that's when it's going to really take off. That's when the wind is going to really increase. But it's the storm surge that is the real danger and what everybody is quite concerned about here in Florida.
Yeah, I mean, just looking around you there, as you say, not a soul in sight. Car on the road just behind you, and I'm wondering if cars are likely to be washed away if there is storm surges. Just tell us, though, Mark, when can we expect this to make landfall, this weather system?
Well, it's going to likely make landfall as we get into the evening. And we talk about landfall, we're talking about when the eye sort of comes on land. But keep in mind that it's not a point. These storm systems are very, very large. And so you're seeing effects, like, as you can see, you're already starting to see effects already. So the conditions are just going to get worse and worse from now on until that eye makes landfall, likely a little bit south of Tampa, which is actually a very good scenario for Tampa itself, because if it came into the bay, you were going to potentially see 15 feet of storm surge. Now, because the eye is just going to be a little bit south, we're not looking at that much surge coming into the bay. So Tampa may have once again escaped that potential major catastrophe.
Mark, you are, of course, a storm hunter, so this is sort of your line of work, isn't it? I'm just wondering, A, have you ever seen anything like this before? And B, do you not feel like you yourself are in danger there?
Well, I mean, this is Hurricane 28 for me. So the biggest one that I went through it's just on another level, which was Hurricane Katrina in 2005 in Gulfport, just outside of New Orleans. That one was something else. But I think this year though, we had Helene just like a little less than a week and a half ago, and I was in that one. For the Weather Network, we're live streaming. We're live stream this one a little later on our YouTube channel. But this one again, what I was very concerned about was that surge into the urban area of Tampa. But it does look like that surge instead is going to come into Sarasota. So I think that's the silver lining. It's the best of a bad situation at this point.
And have people been given enough time to evacuate, do you think? Because not everyone is expected to leave the at-risk areas, are they?
Yeah, I mean, the big problem is that some people simply can't. You don't have the money. There's some areas that are poor. People can't necessarily get out very easily. They haven't got $1,000 to have a hotel for a couple of nights. So they, are just sort of holding on where they can. There's a great saying, flee from the water, hide from the wind. The cities and the counties have opened up shelters. People are moving into shelters now. People are sort of making those final preparations. And I'm hoping, my fingers are crossed that everybody that can get out has gotten out just in case. Better to have moved to a shelter and not have surge in your house than the other way around.
Okay, well, we really appreciate you taking the time to speak to us, and do stay safe there. Weather Network presenter and storm hunter Mark Robinson, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
Let's get some business news for you now. The US is considering breaking up Google due to accusations of causing harm to Americans. Well, the Department of Justice has been exploring options since an August ruling which found that Google illegally stifled competition in online search. Well, if approved, it could be the largest regulatory action in big tech history. Well, Google has strongly opposed the proposals, warning they could harm consumers, businesses, and developers. Shares in 7 and I Holdings, which are the owners of 7-Eleven, rose today after receiving a takeover offer from Canadian rival Alimentation Couche-Tard. Well, 7 and I confirmed the new offer. It did not provide further details. Well, Bloomberg reported that the offer values the company at more than $47 billion. Well, shares closed 4.7% higher in Tokyo after peaking at a 9.5% increase. And Hyundai is going to roll out a $3.3 billion IPO of its India unit next week. Well, this is expected to be the largest stock market debut in India. Well, the price range for the initial public offering has been set at just over $22 per share. Brazil's Supreme Court has lifted its ban on the social media platform X in a row over banning accounts spreading misinformation about the 2022 presidential election. Well, it was announced that X could resume operations in the country after suspending the accounts, paying $5.1 million in fines and appointing a local representative as required by Brazilian law. And some sports news for you just before we go. Novak Djokovic took a step closer to his 100th ATP title with a commanding 6-3, 6-1 win over Romain Safelin at the Shanghai Masters. Well, the 37-year-old Serb, who won his 99th title with Olympic gold in August, is going to face the Czech teenager Jakub Mensik in the quarterfinals. Well, Djokovic aims to join Jimmy Connors and Roger Federer as the only men with 100 tournament victories to their name. Heavyweights Moses Itamu and Johnny Fisher will be on the undercard for Tyson Fury's rematch with Alexander Usyk on the 21st of December in Saudi Arabia. Well, Itamu will face the Australian Dempsey McKean, while Fisher will face fellow Brit Dave Allen. Well, Fury is looking for revenge against Usyk in his bid to become a three-time heavyweight world champion after losing their undisputed match in May. The former Liverpool manager Jurgen Klopp has been named global head of soccer at Red Bull. The 57-year-old German is going to start this new role on the 1st of January 2025. Well, Red Bull stated that Klopp will not handle daily operations, but will provide advice on playing style, transfer strategy, and coaching development. And in tennis news, line judges are going to be eliminated from Wimbledon after 147 years. This as the All England club switches to electronic line calling from next year. Well, the technology will be used for all qualifying and main draw matches, replacing judges who shout out calls like out and fault on serves. Well, the Australian Open and the US Open implemented electronic line calling in 2021 and 2022, respectively. Let's get a reminder of our top stories just before we leave you. The Foreign Minister of Saudi Arabia is in Riyadh, where he is discussing the situation in the region. At least 45 Palestinians have been killed, 130 others injured in Israeli attacks during the past 24 hours as heavy fighting leaves 400,000 people trapped in Gaza. And President Biden cancels his trip to Germany as millions of people in Florida are advised to evacuate immediately. A severe weather system, Hurricane Milton, is on track to make landfall. That's all we've got time for. Coming up next is Riz Khan, and at 1:30 p.m. Eastern Time, do join Rosanna Lockwood for Global News Today. Thanks for watching. Stay tuned if you can.